Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Orlando is known worldwide as the premier theme park Halloween event. And this year in 2022, for the first time ever, I finally had the chance to experience all the ghoulish glory HHN had to offer. For years I'd heard how amazing the event was, so of course I was super excited to go experience everything firsthand. I made sure to research everything about the different houses, scare zones, and food for this year, and I went into my trip feeling confidently prepared for everything like I always do. But I quickly learned that my research could only take me so far, and that HHN had its own separate plans in store for me. Now don't get me wrong, the event was outstanding overall, but there was one glaring thing that I did not prepare for. And perhaps the most frustrating part about it is I don't think there was any way I even could have prepared for it ahead of time. So let's get into it and talk about what I found to be the most annoying thing about Universal Orlando's Halloween Horror Nights 31. To help set the scene, I visited Universal the week of September 4th through September 9th, and did HHN the nights of Sunday the 4th and Thursday the 8th. So it was literally the first week of Halloween Horror Nights this year, and I've heard that the event usually gets better later on in the season as they have time to smooth out any kinks and really get a good flow going for the event. So I think it's safe to say I likely didn't get to experience quote-unquote peak HHN, and that things could be totally different now compared to the week I visited. Okay, let's get right to it. So my biggest gripe with HHN is somewhat related to the stay and scream process. So let's start there. And to briefly explain what stay and scream is, here's how it works. So what happens is on HHN event days, since Halloween Horror Nights is a separately ticketed event, Universal Studios Florida closes early at 5 p.m. in order to get guests out of the park and have everything ready by 6:30, which is the official start time of HHN. So just to be clear, a standard Universal Park ticket for that day will not get you into Halloween Horror Night, nor is a standard park ticket required for you to be able to purchase a ticket for Halloween Horror Nights. Now, Stay and Scream is for those who have both a park ticket and an HHN ticket for that night. So when security begins clearing out guests in the afternoon, you can scan your HHN ticket and still remain inside of the park in one of the designated Stay and Scream areas, which you sort of feel like cattle being herded into these fenced-in areas. But this allows you early access to some of the houses before the front gate opens at 6:30 for everyone else who only had HHN tickets for that night. And believe it or not, I actually noticed people getting in line for their first house as early as 4 p.m. So it's a great way to make efficient use of your time and knock out a handful of houses within the first couple of hours. You just have to choose which area to wait in that has the house you'd like to walk through first. Sounds simple enough, right? That's what I thought too, but I soon discovered that, just like with Transformers, there's a lot more than meets the eye when it comes to Stay and Scream. So let's dive into my experience and you'll see what specifically annoyed me. Okay, for starters, on my first HHN night, I noticed that people began entering the Stay and Scream zones pretty early, like even before 4 p.m. I held off closer to 5 p.m., but I chose the New York area. Now, first I noticed what appeared to be a spectacularly long line for the Halloween house. So naturally I said, I'm staying away from that one for now. I actually wanted my first house to be Dead Man's Pier, Winter's Wake, as I'd heard great things about it from opening night, and I knew it was in the New York area of the park. But I quickly discovered that the only two houses I could get in line for were either Halloween or Spirits of the Coven. Given the long line for Halloween, I decided to wait for Spirits of the Coven, and I then noticed that the line for Halloween began moving like right after 5 o'clock, and people who had already been through that Halloween house were then hopping right into the line for Spirits of the Coven, standing not too far back from where I already had been standing for a good 20 minutes at least. And finally by 5:30 the line started moving, and it went relatively quickly from there. But it sure would have been nice to know that the Halloween house was opening earlier. And if you're wondering, no, there were no posted opening times for the houses either on the app or at the house queue entrances at the time when I got in line for Spirits of the Coven. At least the good news was that by the time I exited that house, It was close to 6 p.m. and I went right over to Dead Man's Pier because I did see that they posted it would open at 6 p.m. at that point. So I hopped right in line for that. But still, it left me feeling that Stay and Scream was kind of a bit unorganized and a little bit of a cluster bleep, if you know what I mean. Fast forward to my second HHN night, I decided to wait in the Springfield Stay and Scream area since I knew I wanted my first house to be the weekend after hours nightmare. On the first night, I noticed it had a super long line like the whole night, so I figured I'd knock it out right away. I noticed people were already getting in line for that house even a few minutes before 4 p.m., so I figured I might as well be one of the first in line. And in doing so, I discovered it is possible to get in line too early for something. Now the lines for the houses are just like your typical theme park lines, meaning I couldn't exit the line to go to the bathroom, get any food, etc. without losing my spot in line. I guess I didn't think it through beforehand when I got in line that early. However, I did remember from the other night that the Halloween line began moving at around 5 p.m. So I thought an hour in line wasn't so bad, so not a big deal really. Plus, I'd also have a good head start on everything else for the evening. Now, I'll also note that the Universal Monsters Legends Collide house was the other line you could wait in within the Springfield Stay and Scream area. Anyway, while I'm waiting in line, I'm of course on my phone just checking things like everyone else does. But at 5 o'clock, I suddenly noticed that the house opening times were showing up on the Universal app, and it showed that the weekend house wouldn't open until 5:45. I sure as hell did not sign up for almost a 2-hour wait when I originally got in line, but I was already invested, so I stuck it out. And the kicker was that the Legends Collide house, which I mentioned their line was right next to ours, opened earlier at 5:30. So again, just like the first night, I apparently chose the house that opened later. Now ultimately, it truly did give me a great head start on the night, and within a 45-minute period, I was able to knock out the Weekend After Hours Nightmare, Legends Collide, Horrors of Blumhouse, and Halloween, which Legends Collide and Blumhouse surprisingly were both complete walk-ons, and the Halloween house only ended up being a 15-minute wait. But it was sort of agonizing just standing in the same spot for almost 2 hours. But the important takeaway here, which is in fact the thing that annoyed me the most about HHN, is that house opening times are a crapshoot. Or to describe it more accurately, different houses open at different times on any given day. And the house opening times aren't posted on the Universal app until after 5 p.m. Now, since most people get in line for their first house well before 5 p.m., you can't really know what houses will open at what time until you're most likely already waiting in line for your first house. So you're more or less just blindly waiting in line for something without knowing when it will open. Sounds frustrating, right? Well, it definitely was for me in the sense that I like to plan ahead and have a specific game plan of a certain order I like to do things in. But the way Stay and Scream was set up, it really didn't allow for that to happen, and made me feel like I essentially made the wrong choice of what house to wait in line for on both my visits. Now I will say this, because this was the first few days of the event, there wasn't enough time to really check on the Universal app to notice any patterns forming throughout the season. But from what I've gathered over multiple days of checking when the house is open since my trip, it seems like most houses are open by 6 p.m. and the Halloween house usually opens before Spirits of the Coven. But other than that, there's not too much of a pattern really. For example, Legends Collide opened at 5:30 when I was there, but as you see here on Friday, October 14th, it didn't open until 5:45. And sure, a 15-minute difference seems nitpicky, but it also shows that you just don't know when a specific house will open until after you're more than likely already waiting in line for a house. Which leads me to my final point, in that the unpredictability factor can absolutely be frustrating, but ultimately I think it is by design, and I'm sure many would argue it's one of the most endearing things about HHN. Because if you think about it, why wouldn't HHN be unpredictable? The event should be inherently unpredictable. If you knew when and where someone is going to pop out and scare you beforehand, then it totally ruins the scare factor. And in regard to house opening times, if everybody knew a specific house would open before others on a given evening, then I'm sure you'd see a disproportionate amount of people crowding into that line instead of spreading out to others. I mean, Universal already has to deal with the mad rush for Hagrid's every morning over at Islands of Adventure, so I can see why they might want to avoid the same thing at Halloween Horror Nights. But overall, even though it may not have sounded like it, I can't stress this enough how much I truly loved this event, and it's definitely going to be something I plan on doing every year from here on out. And by all means, please let me know down in the comments, guys, how your own HHN experience went, and if you found any aspects to be particularly annoying, or if you simply had the time of your life, as I love hearing everyone's different takes on events like this. Anyway, that's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor and hit the thumbs up, as it really helps the channel grow. And of course, subscribe for more theme park news, tips, tricks, and adventures. As always, I've been Mike with Trout Takes, and we'll see you all real soon.